Hello, and welcome to the British Cartographic Society's Teatime Talks. My name is Chris Rebutis. I am the coordinator for the Teatime Talks, and I will be today's chair. So, today's speakers are Andy Hinton and Chris Walton from the UK Hydrographic Office. Andy is the Geographic and Technical Manager, England South and East Coasts, and Chris is the Geographic and Technical Lead for Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland, and the West Coast of England. Today's talk will be on marine cartography in UK waters. In this talk, we'll hear about the regulatory regime and international conventions that the UKHO has to work under, the main differences between mapping topography and charting the sea, and the specific thought and processes and issues that are involved in charting our UK waters. So for us to hear more, I'm going to pass you over to Andy and Chris.
Okay, thank you, Christopher. I'll now turn off my camera and hopefully the presentation will turn up. There we go. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Christopher and Jim, for the invite. It's great to have the opportunity to speak to such an auspicious institution as the BCS on the work we do here in Taunton. Introduce myself as a bit more. Andy Hinton, I'm the Geographic and Technical Lead for East and the South Coast of England, and Christine covers the rest of UK waters. Now, between us, we've got 80 years of experience in marine cartography, which is a ridiculous amount of years, and we probably have seen virtually everything there is to see with regard to marine cartography in the region. Our basic job is to ensure that our charts and electronic nautical charts, which are the digital equivalent of the paper chart, are up to date and fit for purpose. Jim, can you go on to the next slide, please? When we were asked to give a talk to the BCS, we were very tempted to blind you with science and cover all the whizzy technical software that we use when we do our work. But then we thought, what a great opportunity here to go back to basics and describe the work we do in Taunton and what sets it apart from land mapping. Now, the reason is that we often hear charts described as maps of the sea, or sometimes even worse, just maps. And with people who say this, we always have to correct them, because to our minds, these are not maps, they are charts, and they're two entirely different things. Over the years, we've come to the conclusion that the reason for this is that charting is less well known about than mapping, and so is less understood. So the purpose of this talk mainly is to cover the main functions associated with charting and point out the differences with mapping where we can. Now, before I go on, I must warn you here that our knowledge of mapping is limited in the extreme. So I hope we are not going to do any land mappers amongst you any disservice. If we are, then please let us know at the end. The talk itself will be split into three general parts. First, like to very quickly here, just go through the regulatory regime and international conventions that we have to abide by. Then go on to the specific differences between mapping and charting, and describe especially the dynamic nature of the hydrography around the UK. And then finally discuss the main factors we have to consider when charting. Okay, Jim, next slide. So let's start here by our responsibilities and the conventions that we have to work under at the UK Hydrographic Office. You may not know this, but every maritime nation in the world has to follow the UN's SOLAS convention, which is safety of life at sea. This is to protect the welfare of mariners worldwide as they go about their business. The UK government delegates down the responsibility to the MCA, who are responsible for navigational safety around the coast of the UK. And in turn, the UKHO has the responsibility to provide accurate and up-to-date official products in support of the SOLAS Convention in UK waters. What products do we produce? Well, we obviously produce a whole series of paper charts and electronic nautical charts, and as well as that, a whole range of navigational products such as sailing directions, list of lights, radio signals, and tide tables. We also issue out official data, compiled data to third-party licensees, and this data then goes into charting apps, which small craft and leisure users tend to use more now than our paper charts. As well as this, we issue what we call notices to mariners. Now, if you're not aware of what notices to mariners are, these describe significant changes to navigation that have occurred on charts between new editions. They're provided free of charge and produced daily on a daily basis on the web, and they're seen as a necessity to meet our SOLAS obligations. I must admit, I'm not sure whether this is the case in land mapping. In terms of the format and display of detail on our charts, we have to strictly adhere to IHO guidance, which is given in the document INT 1. This covers all aspects of a chart, including the size, the shape, the colors, and all the symbology that we use. The purpose of this is to make all charts basically look the same anywhere in the world. Again, I'm not sure if mapping has to abide by these conventions. This standardization improves the safety of navigation, of course, but it is a slightly inflexible system. Any new symbols have to be agreed by the IHO before we can insert them on a chart. So we've got an example recently where the Marine Management Organization wishes to insert a voluntary no anchoring area, I think in Poole Harbour. We currently can't chart that because we don't have the appropriate symbols, so we're going to have to go to the IHO to get the approval for that symbol, if it's a new symbol that's going to be used, before we can actually chart it. Okay, Jim, let's go on to the next one. Right, I thought best, before we go into detail, just to show you a typical chart, because there may be people out there who've never seen a nautical chart or Admiralty chart. The example here is close to my heart because it's my hometown Exmouth, chart 2290, the chart scale of 12,500. I'm actually talking to you now from top northwest corner of that inset graphic. I just want to show you this as an example, just to go through the conventions we have when we chart. So the coastline, let's start with the coastline. Our coastline is referred to mean high water springs, which immediately sets it apart from OS maps, who use mean high water. All the depths and drying heights that we use on our charts are related to lowest astronomical tide, which is the lowest tide which will occur every 18.6 years. That's the cycle of time whereby we have every permutation of the sun and the moon around the earth. So you should see a full range of tides around during that cycle. Convention on colors is that land is always shown in yellow. Our intertidal area, that is the area between the coastline and the 0 meter line, we always show in green, and that's the area that dries at low tide. Shallow water we color in blue, and that depends on the chart and what the depths are on the chart itself. Deep water we show in white. We also have the standard contours that we show, and these don't vary, and they're shown there. The only one that varies, I think, is the 15-meter contour, which sometimes we put on, sometimes we don't. Obviously, if the charts go out to deeper water, there are other contours that we use. Symbology, like I say, covers all features like buoys, lights, and wrecks and obstructions, and is standardized internationally. On this chart also, you might see at the top there that we have some, sorry Jim, I think we need to go back. We have cautionary notes. In this area, we have cautionary notes for changing depths and buoyage. We have cautionary notes for the presence of nature reserves, which is shown in green, and also cautionary notes for submarine cables and pipelines. Okay, Jim, on to the next one. So what do we see as the main differences between a map and a chart? Well, I am speaking very generally here, as you might imagine. The way we see it is that a map of land basically covers a relatively static environment where any changes that do occur can usually be visualized, such as new roads and buildings. And because they can be visualized, the measurement of them is quite straightforward. On the chart, however, it's a completely different matter. A chart covers a dynamic environment where the water, seabed, and marine features are constantly changing or migrating. To add to the complexity, obviously, underwater features can't be visualized. And because of the changeable nature of hydrography, we have to issue updates for navigationally significant changes between new editions of charts, which again might be a difference between a chart and a map. Just give you a few examples of features that do change. Well, the seabed changes. Sandbanks rise vertically and they move horizontally, and I'll show you a few examples over the next slides because people may not appreciate the horizontal movements of the seabed. As the seabed changes, obviously aids to navigation change as well, to mark the shoal depths and also to mark where the channels are. So aids to navigation include buoys, lights, and beacons. Wrecks go down, wrecks get salvaged, so they change a lot. You might think the fishery limits are pretty static, but no. We recently had to issue 27 urgent new editions for all the fishery limits changes with regard to Brexit, which was a huge amount of work that we had to undertake. Oil and gas installations are relatively static, but what we're seeing now is the decommissioning of oil and gas platforms in the North Sea. And so they are basically coming off the charts. Wind farms, huge expanse of wind farms and huge construction projects underway around the coast of the UK. And so we are seeing a great many of those featuring on our charts. Okay, Jim, let's go to the next one. So what I want to do is just show you just how much the seabed changes, because as I say, you might not appreciate how much it does change. The first example is what we call sand waves. You might not have heard of sand waves before. These are basically sand dunes on the seabed, and they move. Not only do they move vertically, but they move horizontally. And these can attain heights of between 10 and 15 meters. They cover vast areas of the seabed, as is shown here, and they pose a great risk hazard to shipping. The example here is the traffic separation scheme, the deep water route in the Dover Straits. And as you can see, this bank of sand waves covers the entire channel. They rise vertically during calm weather, and what generally tends to happen is that when the first storm comes along, the tops get knocked off and they go shallower, but then they form again with calmer weather. The MCA are very concerned, as you might imagine, about these sand waves, and they have what they call a routine resurvey program, whereby these areas are surveyed on an annual basis, particularly in the main shipping channels where they exist. Okay, Jim, next one. But it's not just sand waves that move. You know, most along the east coast and in areas of the Irish Sea and the Bristol Channel, most of the sandbanks and therefore most of the channels between them tend to move. And this all depends on the nature of the seabed. East coast of England, we have soft sand and mud. So as you can imagine, you know, we see high mobility in those particular areas. And we also see, you know, changes to the ship's routes going into these ports as a consequence. This diagram on the right-hand side is something that we always show visitors who are not aware of the mobility of the seabed. And basically what we did here was just track the main routes into the port of Lowestoft over the years, over a decade. And as you can see from the diagram there, you know, it's changed enormously. In 1970, vessels entering Lowestoft came through the Stanford Channel to the south there. That eventually got, well, within a year, that got closed off as the sandbanks migrated, and vessel had to go 4 miles to the north to enter Lowestoft. Then that channel itself got closed off and it was back to Stanford Channel, but slightly north. And then basically you're seeing this yo-yo effect. It's all dictated by the mobility of the sandbanks. Okay, Jim, next one. So here in Exmouth, we also are affected by a mobile seabed. What you're looking at here is a Channel Coast Observatory survey that was done in 2020, and it's overlaid over the existing chart at that time. You can see there that the green areas, as I say, are the drying banks, the existing drying banks. And you can see from the survey data, which is the smaller figures, color coded, that the drying contour has extended a great distance to the west of the main channel, the main Boyd Channel, which you can see runs northwest to southeast through the center of the graphic. It's gone so far basically that it's now impinging or encroaching on the main Boyd Channel, and this poses, you know, a serious hazard to shipping. And in this case, we liaise closely with the harbour master, give him the results of the survey. We assessed it, we issued notices to mariners, and we pointed out to the harbour master that there seems to be a new approach channel appearing 300 meters to the east of where the current Boyd Channel is currently located. And eventually, they haven't taken action yet, but eventually the harbour master will have to move the buoys to mark the new approach channel. This is the view that a typical assessor or compiler will see, and it's their job to pick out the critical depths from a new survey by comparing to the existing products that we have out there, and then they will issue a notices to mariners. Okay, next slide, please. Chris and I are currently working on trying to define the extent of the areas of mobility around the UK. The work that we do will then be used in a new classification system for the quality of source data on the chart, and that's called the quality of bathymetric data. For the first time, a temporal variation variable will be inserted into the classification process. At the current time, no credit is given to the mobility of an area on the source data's quality classification. So basically, what will happen in future is that the quality of survey data will deteriorate or be reduced in areas of high mobility over the years. What I wanted to do with this series of graphics is just show you the extent of the sand wave areas, which are shown here in red, and the areas where we have cautionary notes on our charts which indicate that the depths do change. And as you can see, they cover vast areas, and the polygon we're going to define for areas of mobility, if you can see it, is the enclosing brown line around all these features. Okay, Jim, next one. Okay, Jim, I'm having a bit of problem on my screen. I don't know if everybody else is seeing that. That's it. Okay, let's move on and just describe the way in which we update our charts in between new editions. We've got various types of notice to mariners, and whichever method we use basically is dependent on the significance and the urgency of the change. First type are the radio navigational warnings. These are short-term broadcasts that are issued out. I must point out that all information that comes into our office is assessed straight away by our radio navigational warnings team, and they assess whether it's going to affect it's a major change in a busy shipping channel. If it is, they will then issue these radio navigational warnings. Basically, there's two types. There's Nav Area 1 warnings, and we are the coordinator for the Northeast Atlantic for these. These have to be issued 30 minutes from the receipt of the data. So you can see they're pretty major things. They cover the major shipping lanes and would include things like a wreck going down in a busy shipping channel, or a major change to major lights and buoys, or even live weapons firing. Coastal navigation warnings do much the same thing, but these are more local. UKHO is the national coordinator for these, and these warnings will be operational until the more conventional notice to mariners conveys the information contained in the coastal navigational warning. Okay, Jim, next one. Okay. Not only do we issue radio navigational warnings, obviously we update our charts on a daily basis by notice to mariners. And these basically are designed to cover less than 10 positions. That's the limit we have on notice to mariners. Example there is the NM that we issued for the the Exmouth survey that came in, and these basically just give instructions to the mariner or chart user on how they should be updating their charts. So it basically says insert the shoal depth in this location and perhaps delete the existing survey that was directly under it. As I say, there's a limit of 10 positions that we impose on ourselves for these notices to mariners. If the change is covers a greater area or more than 10 positions, then we either issue a notice to mariners block or we are in new edition territory. And the example on the right hand side is the chart just off Liverpool, where we received a very large MCA survey, loads of changes shown compared to the chart. And not only that, there was a new wind farm being inserted as well at that time. So we obviously decided that we had to do this by issuing a new edition. And we roughly issue about 80 to 100 new editions of our charts annually. And we have 460 charts in total, so it's virtually a quarter of our charts we issue annually. I must point out that what I've told you so far affects the paper chart. For electronic nautical charts, it's a different matter. We have the ability to update ENCs fully in real time. So basically all the updates are in full. Basically all the information, all the survey information is included on our ENCs in real time, whereas with the paper chart we only convey navigationally significant information. Okay, Jim, next one. And I'd now like to pass you on to Chris, who will take it home from there.
Good afternoon, everybody. It's nice to be speaking to you, although it is rather strange speaking to a screen rather than a proper audience. So I'm conscious of time as well, so please bear with us. Now Andy's explained the dynamic environment that we work in and the fact that we update our charts frequently. I just want to do a little bit about what issues are associated with charting and what our chart compilers need to consider. Specifically, this is when they're using a bathymetric survey, what sort of things they need to consider when compiling a bathymetric survey into our database and including it on our charts. So they need to look at things like quality, coverage, mobility, and selection of depths. And I'll go into those in more detail on these slides. So next one, please, Jim. So to go back to the quality, the first thing I need to talk about is the types of surveys that we have. So up until about the First World War, all surveys were done by using lead lines, which is basically throwing a lead weight over the side attached to a line and measuring the depth. As you can tell, that they were slow to do and not that accurate. But actually what we have found is that they were accurate in what they found, just that there were lots of gaps in between them. So from about 1935, surveyors started using echo sounders to carry out their surveys. So the first ones were what we call single beam echo sounders. So they navigate along a line, up and down in lines and along the survey area that they wanted to cover, and a beam of sound would go down to the bottom of the seabed. So they were good and accurate on the lines that they surveyed, but as you can see from the diagram on the right, they would miss things in between the lines. But these surveys are still used now. The example on the left is the survey in Exmouth, and as long as the line spacing is close together, they can be really useful. The ports still use them quite often because they're much cheaper than the latest technology. Next one, please, Jim. So since about 2000, multi-beam echo sounders have been used. So these, as you can see on the diagram on the right, these basically emit a swathe of acoustic energy, like a corridor alongside the vessel. And when the vessel steams up and down the lines, there is a little bit of overlap between those swathes. So they cover the whole of the seabed. So the standard is that all significant objects should be detected and minimum depths obtained, and objects can be detected up to a size of a 2-meter cube. In actual fact, they can get much more precise than that now. The really best surveys, they can see a can of beans on the seabed, for instance. But for the first time now, we can actually visualize the seabed, as you've seen in some of the previous slides, and on this one at the bottom, we can actually visualize what the seabed looks like now. So here you can see sand waves and sand ripples on top of them. Lovely intricate diagrams. I could look at them all day, actually. These bathymetric surfaces that we call them. So not only sand waves can we can see in detail wrecks and pipelines and other features on the seafloor. Next, please, Jim. So that was the quality of the data. We also, this slide is trying to explain that the International Hydrographic Office is standard for quality of bathymetry, as Andy's spoken about before. They use a term called CATZOC, category of zone of confidence. So basically, so that the mariner will know how much confidence they can place in that data, the data from that survey. And that ranges from CATZOC A1, which is a full area search undertaken by one of these modern multi-beam surveys, to CATZOC C, where it's a low accuracy survey, perhaps a single beam echo sounder survey with large spacing between the lines, as can be seen here in this example in the Thames estuary. So the underlying data is the chart as we had it, and there was a survey done, a lower quality survey. It was just like a check survey, single beam, but the line spacing was 250 meters, which is a long big distance between the lines. So that was given a category of C for quality, and basically it means that we can't use it to disprove any currently charted shoal depths or wrecks in between those lines of soundings. So the items arrowed in, there's some wrecks and some depths there, we retained on that chart. We basically only used this survey for to add anything that shoulder than was already there. And if this kept happening, we'd actually say to the Port Authority they needed to do a proper survey here. Next one, please, Jim. So one of the other things that our compilers look at is the actual coverage of the data. So in this example, we're showing a sort of lack of data. We're in the River Tay here off the east coast of Scotland, inland from Dundee and on the way up to Perth. So you can see that there's a variety of surveys. The bottom right image is what we call our source diagram, and that gives details for the mariner on what all the sources are of the data. You can see it's quite complicated there, lots of different survey authorities and different dates. So in the top right of the chart image on the left, that was a survey from Forth Ports, which was quite comprehensive. But in the southwest part of that image, it was a survey done by Perth and Kinross Council, and basically they only surveyed a narrow strip of the main channel. So you can see that we have to employ techniques like unsurveyed areas. We actually put the legends unsurveyed on there. If you can manage to see on your screens, I don't know whether you'll be able to or not, but between the two surveys there's a little line saying discontinuity between surveys. So we're trying to portray to the mariner how reliable those areas are, what confidence they can place in the chart in that area. But here it's a lack of data. Next one, please, Jim. And the lack of data can mean gaps in surveys. So in this example, It's rather a psychedelic example, I'm afraid. This is a multi-beam survey, a really good multi-beam survey carried out a few years ago off the west coast of Scotland, the Firth of Lorne, which is south of Mull. It's a very rocky area, which is why you see in lots of different colours, because there's lots of differences in depths between in close proximity. So we know it's a rocky area. If hopefully you can see on your screens, there are certain gaps where you can see an image of the chart underneath the survey. And basically, oh, thank you. Thank you very much, Jim. So these gaps in the survey are indicative of water shallower than the surveyor could venture into. So basically, they didn't want to ruin their surveying equipment because it was too shallow and they were worried about getting too close. So we have real problems with this. It's not so bad in the top right area that's arrowed in. If it's close to an island or a rocky area shown in the green, that's low water rock, we'd be expecting everything to shallow there. But the arrow on the left-hand side, those eagle-eyed may be able to see that there's a 7 metre depth in that area at the moment. Well, we're pretty sure now that, thank you, Jim, yeah, we're pretty sure now that there is much less than 7 metres of water there because the surveyor couldn't survey that bit. It was too shallow. So in that instance, we would probably insert a rock symbol, with not necessarily with the depths, but it would show us a danger on the chart then. We don't like the ones like that. They give us real headaches. Next one, please. And then finally, seabed mobility. As Andy's talked a lot about the mobility of the seabed, but this is just an example of Home Channel, which is off Great Yarmouth. So the depths in blue on the survey that's shown were conducted by an MCA survey, a good quality multi-beam survey, achieved a grading of A1 in October 2018. Shortly after that, Trinity House conducted a survey because they conduct surveys to see where they need to place their buoys. Again in December 2018, so 2 months later, but that was only a single beam survey, so it was given a category B. So the sort of things we have to think about then are, should that more recent but lower quality Trinity House survey be used, or should we use the better quality but older survey by the MCA? So those are the sort of things we have to take into account, and that decision will depend on how mobile we think the area is, whether it's sandy, muddy or rocky, the period between the surveys, and how much difference is shown, etc. In this instance, there's up to 1 metre of difference shown in 2 months. So I think we actually went with the Trinity House survey with the knowledge below that from the better quality survey that there were no hard features that we needed to worry about as well. Next one, please, Jim. And finally, our compilers then, when they've taken all of those things into consideration, they have to select depths from the survey. This is no mean feat. It takes our compilers at least a couple of years to get very proficient in this. So the raw survey data, multi-beams raw survey data can amount to trillions of depths. Amazing to think about. But so the first thing we do once it's been validated by our bathymetry specialists is we do an automatic shoal bias sounding selection. So we're getting the shoalist depth, but we get a sounding selection such that at the scale of our chart, there's no overlapping depths, so we can actually read it properly. This again is Home Channel that we showed you earlier, but we've still got thousands of depths on there, and we need to select 20, 30, whatever in this area, representative depths for charting. And this is still pretty much a manual process. We do automatic contouring, or semi-automatic contouring. So we produce the contours first, and then the compilers select the depths. So they need, not only do they need to include the shoalist depths and dangers, because obviously mariners will need to avoid those, They also need to include, obviously, the deeper channels. They're as important as the shoals because that's where the mariners will be navigating. So we need to think about what routes are used by vessels and what types of vessels are in the area and what draft they have. So there's a big difference between leisure craft and container vessels and submarines, for instance. And so this is, like I say, a very complicated process, and that's why it's still manual. We haven't found an algorithm that will do all of that thinking that a compiler does naturally. We haven't found one yet, unless it's on a very, very gently shelving seabed, which we don't have many of those around the UK. Okay, Jim? So hopefully that's a bit of a whistle-stop tour of what we do here in Taunton. I hope we haven't blinded you with science and acronyms and marine terms that you're not familiar with. So we apologise if you have, but we also hope that we've given you a bit of a taste of the work that we do in Taunton. So thank you very much indeed for listening, and over to questions.
Okay, so thank you very much. That was a very detailed talk about on a hydrographic survey. So, and it's generally that is very interesting. So if anyone wishes to ask any questions, if they put the questions in the chat area that can be found at the bottom of the screen, and we will start working through them. So one of the questions we have is, where do you get all the data? Where do you get all the data from, and what type of data is it?
Well, thank you. Yeah, thank you for the person who asked that question. Actually highlights another area where UKHO is probably different from the land mapping, in the fact that we don't proactively acquire data like, say, the Ordnance and Survey. We don't commission surveys ourselves. However, we are responsible, for SOLAS. Therefore, we expect data to come to us free of charge and in a timely manner. The vast amount of data we get comes from our ports. Every port in the UK has to come under the Port Marine Safety Code, which is administered by the MCA, and in that they are obliged to send us in their latest hydrographic survey data. So the data comes in from the ports. We get roughly 300 to 400 surveys in UK waters every year. I'd say probably 80% of those are from the ports, but we also get other survey data. MCA run a civil hydrographic program, which is a £5 million program, I believe, every year, and they basically go around the coastal waters outside of port limits, and they are methodically improving the quality of the survey data around the UK. Those surveys come straight through to us, and we appraise them, get them onto our charts, and something like 50% of the new editions we produce originate from MCA survey data. We also get survey data from general lighthouse authorities, Trinity House, Northern Lights in Scotland, other institutions such as CFAS, Channel Coast Observatory, Natural England, District Council even do surveys, and they come through to us, and the Royal Navy as well, although the Royal Navy don't do so much surveying as they once did. On the non-survey side, we are linked into the marine licensing process, which is managed by the Marine Management Organisation in Newcastle. So any license that is granted to a contractor basically states if there are any changes in the offshore environment, they are obliged to send in that data to information about those changes to us as part of their marine license consent. So this covers things like wind farms, cables, pipelines, any construction work, dumping of material at sea, extraction areas, dredging and the like. So basically, we have quite an intricate system of data supply that works well, basically. And not only that, obviously, members of the public can send in information to us, and they duly do in the form of hydrographic notes. So information is coming into us on a regular basis.
If I can just jump in there. The bit that Andy's forgotten is all the port information we get. So we have agreements with all the ports around the UK, and they send in any data, new data inside their areas in terms of port notices to mariners, detailing any changes in their port area, new developments or changes to buoys and lights and the like. Okay, thanks.
Okay, right. So continuing on the theme of the data, it's one question we have is, how are you determining the seabed makeup, mud, shell, sand, etc.? Can you determine this from the sounders, or is there still some soundbed sampling taken?
Okay, I can take on that one. So yes, so that's all part of the surveys. Certainly the MCA back surveys, that's what they do as part of that. So there is still some seabed sampling, but they use acoustic data in the surveys to identify what the seabed morphology is as well. I don't know the technical details of that because I'm not a surveyor, I'm afraid, but that's what they do. Andy, have you got any more as an ex-surveyor, please?
Yeah, it's backscatter data. Other than that, I'm struggling. But I know that data, I think, is supplied to BGS, British Geological Society. Yeah. Yeah, so yeah, they do. They can basically map out the seabed morphology and the sediment types, and then they still use grab samples just to justify or ground truth, if you like, what they're seeing with the backscatter data. And it's a standard requirement in all MCA surveys that they conduct those observations.
Okay, so. Right, so continuing on, as well as MMO, what about the other devolved authorities for marine licensing information?
Yes, we do work. We work with all of the marine licensing authorities. So we work with Marine Scotland in Marine Scotland. We work with the devolved authorities in Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland as well. We were just using MMO as an example in the discussions we've had so far. But we work with them all.
Okay. One question, interesting question here. What has happened to the old copper plates?
Ooh.
Well, there's an interesting question, that one. Unfortunately, I think they have gone. I think, if I'm right in saying, they ended up, unfortunately, under our car park, didn't they?
I think they might have done.
To provide the hardcore for the new car park, which was, in hindsight, what a great shame. There'll be people now digging up our car park, I think.
There are still some examples of the beautiful old copper plates in the entrance to our archive building. So they've not all gone completely. I can see Ken Atherton on the screen. He's one of our ex-colleagues who used to work in the archive. Hello, Ken.
We'll know more about it, I should think. Yeah.
Yeah, but there's certainly some beautiful examples of the old copper plates in the entranceway to our archive, and there's probably still a few in the archive as well. Ken's got them all.
Well, Ken's got them all, partly.
That's where they went.
So, Okay, so another question is, what is the background of people working at the UKHO, and what experience is needed?
Okay, so yeah, interesting question, because when Andy and I joined all those years ago, is given our ages away, which is most rude of him, I think, actually, by saying we've got 80 years experience between us, nearly 80 years experience between us.
Yeah, I'm
I'll forgive you,
92, so
Andy.
yeah.
So when we first joined, the basic entrance requirements were O levels, as they would have been then. It's now degree level, and Andy and I both joined as graduates at a slightly higher level. There was a graduate entry then, but it's now a graduates, mainly the starting point for the compilation side of things, but increasingly our graduates have got some GIS background, and of course they're doing lots of GIS type work as part of their degrees now. So it's relevant degrees, cartography, well, anything to do with cartography and GIS. But we now have a lot of data scientists, and yeah, people working on artificial intelligence, for instance. So it's a really lovely open area to work for. It's not just cartography now; it's very much broader than that. So yeah.
Yeah, we have people with surveying qualifications as well. They work in our Bathy data center. They process and appraise the surveys themselves. We also have navigational specialists. So these are people who come in from the industry, basically, who advise us on the navigational aspects of our work, because basically we are just cartographers, we're not navigators. Yeah, and it's a vast range of work that we do. We got oceanographers as well, all sorts of disciplines we cover. Anything to do with the marine environment, we kind of cover it in some way.
Yeah, so it's quite a wide range of people. I think that's what we can see with a lot of organisations now. That it's not all what you'd normally expect, and just it's just that wide range.
We've also got lots of commercial people and HR people and the like. So yeah, and it's very, very broad.
Mm-hmm. And here's another question: is any links remaining to the Ordnance Survey?
Yeah, so we used to have much stronger links with the Ordnance Survey, actually, when we were actually probably more when the Royal Navy was still surveying. But we do still have links with the Ordnance Survey, but we used to use Ordnance Survey maps more than we do now. I must admit, we don't focus too much on topography now, because the marine environment is more important for navigators or anybody at sea. But we do still have links, and we work collaboratively with them, particularly on development type issues, I think. I don't get involved much nowadays with that, but a lot of our developers and specialists I know still have links with the Ordnance Survey.
Yeah, we you've probably seen this, but in the examples we've shown, but we only show a very generalized depiction of topography. It's major roads, railway lines, built up areas, and conspicuous features, which are, obviously important especially to small craft sailing around the UK. So it's a generalized depiction. We do use OS data, but that's done through, is it Open Office? Open source. And it's all, obviously, we also get kind of our data from ports as well. They'll send in engineering diagrams which get shown on our charts, and we can supply OS with that information if necessary.
Very interesting. So I think yes, and yes, Professor had it confirmed that yes, you do, that the OS does have still have links for the UKHO to help them with offshore, helping them with offshore wind farms.
Offshore wind farms. So good.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you for confirming that.
So one, I think this it might be the last question, but it was actually it's more as an observation that came up during the talk, and it was observed. It's just for the benefit of everyone who doesn't have access, who's not going to see the chat after this. It's the highlighting the coloring was different with Emery versus Admiralty charts, and just wondering, and it was just a question of if it was supposed to be standard.
Yeah.
Okay, Chris. So yeah, this cropped up, and I did a quick answer while you were talking, Andy. So
Right.
the answer there is that IMRE charts are not official products, so they don't need to abide by those international standards. But I think in the talk that it's been pointed out that they are SOLAS compliant. So they're SOLAS compliant, but they're not official products, so they don't have to abide by the same standards as we do.
Mm-hmm. Yes, so I have to say it's been a very, very interesting talk, and it's we've covered I think we've covered a lot of territory, which I think if anyone didn't know much about hydrographic maps before, well, charts before now.
Charts.
If you didn't know anything about charts before now, I think we've got a very good impression of what's involved and everything, and how they are generally put together. And it's been it's been very interesting just seeing the dynamics of how things have changed, how things change on a very regular basis, just by even some of just a few examples you've shown there. So I think with that, we'll probably bring the talk to a close. So I want to say thank you very much to everyone who's joined us today. I want to thank Andy and Chris once again, because they've provided a real wealth of information, which people will take a lot from. So our next talk is going to be from Andrew Farrant from the British Geological Survey, and he'll be giving a talk on applied geology mapping in the southeast of England. So we look forward to seeing everyone in the future, and we'd like to say thank you and goodbye.